Hi, friends. In this series of videos, I'm going to share some of the work I do with a very, very special school district, the Beaufort Delta. This school district is near and dear to my heart. I've been working with them for just about 4 years now. Dear friends, colleagues, and the work is thorough. And as you can see, the Beaufort Delta is in a unique setting. It's one of Canada's most northerly school districts. And schools are very much spread across the Beaufort Delta. Regionally, a lot of them are fly-in only. Some of the schools are quite small. They serve small towns, small villages, small populations. And the Beaufort Delta is very special, partly because of the communities of which the Beaufort Delta serves. A large portion of the families are Indigenous. And with that come really amazing values, beliefs, identities, and stories that the school district has embraced in our planning, in our programming, in our commitments, and in our objectives and strategic plan. So, several years ago, the Beaufort Delta approached me to support them in adopting more of an inquiry stance. And very much looking at the curriculum and looking at the learning through a land-based, localized lens where we start with the identities of which we are serving. And teachers are planning to these identities through land-based experiences, inviting local learning guides into the classroom as often as possible. And I support the district in a myriad of ways. And one way that I support the district is through kind of a cohort model where we invite teachers to come be a part of a bit of a teaching community. Across the school year, we participate in workshops, conversations, collaborative inquiry, and we meet every 4 to 6 weeks online here. And at the end of the year, we engage in what we call a celebration of learning, a share out, where teachers from the Beaufort Delta who have been a part of these cohorts come together virtually and they share a little snippet of their learning journey. And every year, these shareouts are a highlight, the honesty, openness, reflection, vulnerability, and impact of these teachers thinking and planning on student learning, but also on their own learning. It's heartwarming, it's informative, and with their consent, I can share some of those recorded reflections with you here. So I hope you appreciate these, share outs. You're going to be introduced to some dear colleagues, Erica Thompson, Steve Dagar. They helped me facilitate this learning, being from the Beaufort Delta themselves. You'll hear us consolidate some of the teachers sharing, and you get to meet some amazing colleagues from the Beaufort Delta. You get to see into their classrooms. The shareouts are roughly 12 to 20 minutes long. So, get comfortable, sit in, get a cup of coffee or tea. And I invite you just to listen to their reflections, be inspired by the impact that they've helped facilitate, and listen to their own growth, their own learning. And I'm sure you're going to find it not just informative and inspiring, but also deeply helpful for your own practice. And I encourage you at the, outset of watching a video, consider what you may do in your own practice, having learned from these amazing colleagues, these students, their families, these communities, and how this learning might impact you to do something different, to let go of something, to embrace something, and to center something different in your practice. So enjoy. From my heart to yours, I'm really inspired by these teachers and their sharing and the learning that the students facilitated. And I'm sure you're going to enjoy it too.
All right. So, um, I am indeed in a Clavic, and I teach kind of the middle schoolers. So a lot of what we spent our time focusing on, and a lot of what I focused on was engagement and engagement and engagement. Because we started the year and the kids were like, we don't want to do this inquiry thing. This sucks. Why are we asking questions? Um, can we just go back to doing worksheets? Can you please just tell us the things that we're supposed to do? And we don't want to have to think for ourselves. Um, and so a lot of my journey this year was finding, especially provocations that would get the kids interested in what we were doing. And a lot of that, as like everybody else has already mentioned, was trying to find things that were local, and finding elders and kind of those local guides who could help bring us through whatever it was that we were doing. So here I have like pictures of us kind of doing on the land stuff and like making some Inuvialuit donuts. And the kids just kind of got that much more pride from it, because it was something that was connected to here and to their own lives, and to what they wanted to learn about. And so suddenly it moved from, we don't want to ever do this, to like, okay, fine, we can at least maybe try. Um, and kind of moving from that, we also spent a bunch of time talking about like topics that were a little bit more interesting to them. So even like when we kind of moved into our government unit, which like they were like, why are we talking about this? Just shaping it through the lens of like power and like who should have power and like how does that matter in our classroom, they suddenly were like, oh wait, maybe like this is something that we want to know about. Maybe like we actually think it's important, to talk about like indigenous governments and like how this ties into other governments kind of around the world, and kind of bringing that into their own questions. I mean, kind of tied to that was like making sure that the kids saw their own interests reflected in what we did. So I loved, using Trevor's, kind of, not just like the question continuum, but also tying it to that like matrix where you have the really interested and not interested sections, because then the kids could say, hey, we're not just making these questions for random questions' sake. We're actually also going to decide which ones we want to focus on, and which ones we're like, yeah, these might be good questions, but we don't really care. And so that was that was a good chance to do that. Um, as part of that, I also was reflecting on how important it was to scaffold all these skills and routines. When we started the year, even just asking some of the most basic questions was challenging, because we didn't always have the vocabulary to do that. And the kids were like, we feel like we're being thrown into the deep end. And so over time, we kind of worked with matrices, we worked with the question pencil, we worked with so much stuff to just help them build those skills so that they suddenly knew this is what we should do. And so I kind of like, I was looking back, and at the beginning of the year, it took us like several class sessions to get one set of questions made. And then by the end, I had all the kids literally sit down and working at their own desks, and they could just come up with like this big list of questions that they wanted to know about our topics. So that was like really nice to see that it wasn't just like something that the kids were forgetting, but that by building in those routines and those scaffolds, they were getting better and better and better at it, and more independent as time went on. Okay. One of the other things that I loved seeing was actually seeing the student thinking as we did that. Um, because not only as the kids were getting kind of interested in it, but as they were starting to feel happy to actually share out the things that they were interested in, um, they started feeling comfortable to actually share what it was that they were thinking about, not just like kind of looking for those cookie cutter answers that they're like, what does Hannah want me to say? And instead trying to share out the things that they actually wanted to know about, and the things that they were thinking about this item, even if maybe before they hadn't wanted to. And then I have a picture over here of our learning wall, and the kids were starting to be like super proud to even like put up all of their like work and their different like thinking routines and their different just like pictures and artifacts, and just like adding more and more and more onto the wall and seeing it build, and like proudly sharing that out when we had some younger kids come in to kind of do a big whole, school learning walk, was just amazing to see, because I saw their thinking, but they also saw each other's thinking, and they could learn from one another. Aw. And then another big thing for me was feedback. I know, again, lots of us have talked about feedback and how this helped both us reflect, but also the kids reflect. So we kind of did a bunch of both feedback circles. We also did some of the inside outside circles. And the kids were just like, I mean, initially it was a little hard, right? Middle schoolers can sometimes be a little bit blunt, with their feedback, but we worked hard on making sure that it was kind and that it was specific and that it was actually helpful. Not just saying, oh, I don't like your thing. And so by the end, I was loving having hearing the students just like giving each other feedback on like just little things that could be better, but also sharing the things that they loved about whatever it was that we were sharing, and in this case, it was making muskrat collars. But we also had, you know, times when we were sharing some of our cooking and getting feedback on that, and then times when we were sharing out our writing and getting feedback on that. And literally everybody was like with each other, just like focused and interested because suddenly this was something that was meaningful for them. Um, but it also, this feedback wasn't just for the students, but it also really helped me to kind of get this feedback from the students on what they felt was good and what they felt wasn't good and how things were working and weren't working. And that helped me to reflect on what are the things that maybe I want to keep going with, but maybe what are some of the things that I don't like that as much anymore, and that maybe I want to change for next year and going forward. And so kind of tied to that, I kind of identified a couple challenges for me. So one of those was low literacy. I teach the humanities, and so it can be hard for some of the kids to help with the questions and the feedback, even at a middle school level. Um, if this is kind of like a barrier for them. So obviously we try to, support them in as many ways as we can, but it can still be, like I said, a challenge for people to remember feedback if they can't write it down as it's being told to them, or if they can't write it down so that they can share it with their partner. It was also, especially at the beginning of the year, resilience and independence were a little bit of a challenge. And that's something that I saw a lot of improvement with as there was more agency and more engagement. But even now, it's still something that I keep asking myself, what can I do to maybe have the kids do more on their own? What can I do to maybe take a step back and help the kids build their own independence and their own ability to kind of push forward and keep going, even if they aren't maybe as interested in one topic as they were in a different topic. And the final one was kind of all about engagement. Um, and this was a challenge, especially in the 8-9 class, where we sometimes have like 2 students in the morning. Um, and so as soon as you have like 2 students, if one of them says, I'm not interested, suddenly no one's interested. And you basically have nothing that they want to do. Um, and so just kind of making sure that there's some sort of interesting hook or something that we can work on even when those numbers are low is something that I'm going to keep kind of thinking about as I go into the future. So kind of changes and thoughts for next year. I want to try to make more of my thinking visible and more of the student thinking visible just on our learning walls. So we kind of started a little bit of that this year, but I think we could do even more. I also want to try a little bit more question routines, especially ones that relate to like student interest and then helping them to break it down to like how they can actually do the research on their own. And this one especially for Wisdom Fest because a lot of the kids had a challenging time doing their own Wisdom Fest projects this year. So I'm hoping that if we can scaffold it more next year, it should be helpful with that. And that's kind of part of this scaffolding the skills so that the students can do it all independently when they start doing their own projects on their own again. Like a lot of people are talking about, I also want to make sure that I kind of begin a lot of these things early in the year. So I kind of want to start questioning early. I want to start like peer and self-feedback earlier in the year. And then kind of working on building some more independence and agency and engagement as we keep going. Yeah. Well,
Well done, Hannah. Well done. Round of applause. Well done. Okay, I'll go first this time. Steve, Erica, if you don't mind. Hannah, I loved your opening reflection that, there was a lot of complacency and students did not want to do the inquiry thing. They wanted the worksheet. They wanted the traditional or the same old, same old. And it was almost as you were sharing, I was piecing together a bit of an order of operations. It was like complacency first, Hannah sticking with it, like not giving up on that observation, finding something that was a little bit relevant, and the kids were like, "Oh, okay, maybe," right? Like whatever that little morsel of nourishment is, you found it, and then you built on it. I said daily, but you didn't say daily, but it was clear that where you got to and where those initial little morsels were, like there's a big chasm, and you were that bridge between that complacency at first. And so, I love hearing that because I think it resonates with us all. Like the initial response to some of the things we're trying to do might be from students, and no thank you. And Trevor isn't proposing the silver bullet or the magic elixir right away by any means. There's a lot to be done, and the structures are one, but also how you show up really matters, Hannah. And the fact that you stuck with it, I think, showed the kids that you valued it and you were really trying to center them in the planning and the teaching. I love you had said one thing with regards to question routines is that kids see that their interests shape the learning. Love that. And hopefully for all of us, the question routines allow that to happen. I think there are a lot of scaffolds that Hannah was showing us that everyone has articulated, but in order for questions to shape the learning, there needs to be rich provocation, some questioning scaffolds, and there is clearly a progression that you had said. You had said, I look back at the questions from the start of the year compared to at the end of the year, they're able to sit and draft up a whole bunch of questions. I texted Erica, I was like, is that if that's not, an advertisement for question routines, I don't know what is. Like, that's fantastic, Hannah, jokingly. And that also insightfully, you were using their feedback. The feedback that you were facilitating, it wasn't a one-way street, it was a two-way street. You were using it to reflect on what might you do differently. Not just next year. I'm hoping, as we all should, I'm going to should on everyone. We're using their feedback to guide our next steps in planning, right? In the next few days or even in the next few moments. So really, really, what a fortunate opportunity for us all to hear again from everyone. But Hannah, thank you so much for sharing. Erica, how about you? What's your thinking?
I have a lot of thoughts. Number one, I appreciate the vulnerability in which you started us, sort of like, taking us into your thinking through the journey, right from the get-go, and then capitalizing on what I think, came through as your feeling of the most important thing to get to the other places, right? Like engagement is the most, especially in middle school, like there is no other thing that's more important. And so that really came through so clearly. And then I think, the thing I wrote down, one of the things, the last things I wrote down is like your resilience and ability to stay curious and stay learning instead of abandoning that quest is what I think really eventually helped make sure that that was a through line for them as well. Right? Like when we are resilient in the face of it seeming to not work, because we know it doesn't work until it does, right? And then when it does, it's so different. Like, and so I think modeling that model for them and being so dynamic and being so willing, and especially like in your first year of teaching, like middle school, and the quest that you took on is no easy no easy feat in the first year of teaching. And so, just like looking at this and hearing your story, I mean, obviously it doesn't pay off every single day, but I think that when you look back, it must have been quite rewarding to see where you came from and where you ended up, and I think we don't do that enough, right? I think that is another kind of ripple effect of these experiences, being able to look back and then put it together in a way that's visual so we can see where we've come, because that's hard to do. And so that also came through. So I just really appreciate how hard you pursued this experience.
Thank you so much, Hannah. You don't have an easy gig. I mean, I've taught middle school in the North for 15 years. And it is hard. And Erica's right. Engagement is the most important thing. I am going to have a caveat though, in that we do have to teach these kids things that they're not going to want to learn 100%. Like we are still bound a little bit by the things that they have to learn, whether it's math concepts, whether it's about government. There are going to be things that we are going to teach kids where they're going to get glossy-eyed and bored. And I do remember reading Trevor's Dive into Inquiry book where he's like, sometimes I have to teach the essay. And you don't get to do the, small engine mechanics and come in and tell us about it. Sometimes you have to write the essay because I got to prepare it. So sometimes we have to teach the kids the thing. So that's that building of resilience with the kids that you did. Like I know they're like, give me the worksheet, but you're like, stay with me here. I'm going to find the thing that you're going to be engaged with, and we're going to do the question routines. We're going to do the thinking routines. We're going to do the feedback. We're going to build that resiliency so that when I am going to teach you a thing that you might not be so engaged with, you have the tools, the resilience to go in and then talk about government or to talk about whatever the thing is, the math problem. And to echo Erica, it was pretty amazing to see your resilience in the face of potential apathy, and then just saying to the kids, trust me, like we will go on this journey together. So thank you so much. You're in the belly of the beast. Middle school is it's big feelings, big emotions, big opinions. Well, very, very well done. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Hannah, they're lucky to have you, as we are all lucky to have you. And friends, as we, begin to transition to our next share out, one thing that was really continuing to surface for me is, one misstep really tells kids that the learning is going a different way. Like there is a fork in the road in terms of how we take this stance to center the person in the place. And if one of the first things we do is present them with a worksheet, kids are going to be like, oh, we're doing that thing again. Like, okay. And they get on that hamster wheel of that type of learning. And one thing that is evident in all of the share outs is you all are showing that schooling can be done differently for the children in the Beaufort Delta. And I applaud that. And I just call on you to be really explicit and intentional. Like, tell them this might feel different. You might want the worksheet, or you might want the easy right way out. And I'm going to call on you to think or stand or share your curiosity. Like, be clear and be intentional and be explicit with the type of learning experiences that you are facilitating and that you're aiming for. That way there's less uncertainty for the students. I think that could help some of that initial complacency and allow you to not, give them the worksheet, because that is the easy way out for some cases. Thank you, Hannah. Thank